Hey, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, let me explain why some people sometimes think too much. Today's topic hits harder than most. And before we start, I want you to pause for just a second and think about this. Have you ever walked into a room and already felt that something was off? You're thinking about some nonsense, and there's this heaviness in the air you can't explain, and you feel it the moment you step through the door. Or maybe you've received the message and somehow felt the mood of the person who wrote it, not from what they said, but from how they said it, what word they chose, the punctuation, the fact that they didn't use the emoji they always use. Or you've watched someone laugh at a joke and in that same moment quietly analyzed, was that actually genuine laughter? If any of this has happened to you and felt painfully familiar, this video is about you. And here's what I want you to know right away. What I just described is not part of your character or overthinking in the weak sense of that word. There's actually science behind this, and there is a reason why this developed as a problem, a reason that goes much deeper than your childhood. And watch this video to the end, because right here, you'll find out that the same trait that feels like a burden has a very specific evolutionary origin, and knowing that origin completely changes how you understand yourself. We'll get there in a moment, but first, hit like and subscribe if you want to know more about yourself. It genuinely helps my channel and takes only 2 seconds of your time. Let's start with how this began in ancient times. For most of human history, your survival depended not only on strength, but on reading the environment correctly. A predator didn't announce it was going to attack you. A storm didn't send the warning. A member of your group who was about to betray the tribe obviously didn't put up a sign that they would betray you. The people who survived were those whose nervous systems could pick up on the smallest signals before those signals became obvious threats. A shift in body language, a change in someone's breathing, a silence that felt different from the usual kind of silence. Neuroscientists call this the threat detection network, and its center is a part of the brain called the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, constantly scanning the environment for anything that might matter. In most people, this system runs quietly in the background. It fires when there is genuine danger, and then it settles. But in some people, this system runs in hot mode. And here's the question: why? There are 2 separate pathways that lead to what psychologists call hypervigilance, a state of heightened alertness that doesn't switch off. The first is biological. Research by psychologist Elaine Aron identified a trait she called sensory processing sensitivity, present in approximately 15 to 20% of the population. The nervous systems of these people are calibrated from birth to process incoming information more deeply than average, more detail, more layers, more experience. For them, the world always runs at a higher resolution than it does for most people. The second pathway is environmental, and it carries more weight. Imagine a child who grows up in a home where the emotional temperature changes without warning, a parent whose mood swings unpredictably, tension that arrives without explanation and disappears without resolution. That child cannot afford to be caught off guard, so their brain solves the problem the only way it knows. It starts scanning constantly. They memorize the sound of footsteps on the stairs, the way a door closes, the specific silence that means something is wrong, as opposed to the ordinary silence that means nothing. Their amygdala records, this environment is dangerous, and I have to keep watching. I have to know before the danger comes. This is how our nervous system works. It builds this automatically, and it's wired into every one of us. And nobody knows this when they grow up, because this system doesn't stop running just because they're safe now. So what does this actually look like in an adult? It looks like a brain that never fully stops working, even when there's nothing to work on. Their boss sends a 3-word message, "Can we talk?" And within seconds, they've already scanned the tone, the timing, whether there's a period at the end or not, and generated 5 scenarios for what it might mean. A friend takes slightly longer than usual to reply. The overly aware person notices, and they'll probably say nothing about it. They're at dinner with people they love, having a good time, and some part of them is floating near the ceiling, watching from outside, tracking. Did I try too hard? Was that joke too sharp? Did that pause mean something? In psychology, this is connected to what's called the default mode network, the brain system responsible for self-reflection and pattern recognition. In most people, this network settles down when they're relaxed or distracted. In people with hypervigilance, it stays active. It takes notes during rest. It analyzes during conversation. It runs a hidden simulation in the background of every social interaction. The result, they can feel genuinely exhausted after a day when almost nothing happened externally, because their brain just ran a marathon that no one else saw. And here's what I want you to take note of. These people are truly unique. They have a nervous system that built itself around the environment they grew up in, using the only tools that were available to it. Now, it gets more complicated, and this is the part that most videos on this topic skip, so watch to the end so you don't miss the most interesting part. The overly aware person doesn't just read everything around them, they can read people. And when you start reading people well enough, you start seeing things you can't unsee. You notice the long pause before the compliment, the way the praise arrives right before the request, the smile that reaches the mouth but not the eyes, the apology that sounds sincere but doesn't actually include any acknowledgement of what was wrong. Psychologists call this theory of mind, the ability to model other people's internal states, intentions, and hidden motivations. Most people can do this. Overly aware people have this ability running constantly at a frequency that most people around them don't even suspect is possible. And here's the trade-off. They see more truth, but seeing more truth costs something. Because once you've noticed that kindness sometimes comes with conditions, and that confidence is sometimes just a mask over a fear of rejection, and that everything's fine can mean exactly the opposite. You can't go back to taking things at face value. And this creates a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around, the loneliness of being in a room full of people and watching a layer of human experience that no one else seems to be watching. The question I want to leave you with right now is, what is it like to always be the one who notices? Write it in the comments. I'm genuinely asking, because what most people don't realize, the person who always reads everyone else is usually the last person anyone checks in on. There's one more thing that has to be said, and this is the part that's easy to miss. Over time, the overly aware person becomes something more than just an observer. They become the emotional center of gravity for the people around them, because they feel what's in the room, and this often means they start managing it. They soften their voice when the atmosphere tightens. They find the right word when someone is hurting. They absorb other people's emotional states without being asked because their nervous system doesn't give them the option not to. Mirror neurons, the brain's mechanism for modeling other people's emotional experiences, fire strongly in these people. A stranger sitting next to them on the bus taps their foot with nervous energy, and suddenly their own pulse speeds up. A friend talks about grief, and 3 days later, the overly aware person is still carrying some trace of that pain. They become a container, and containers fill up. The cruelest irony is this. The person most attuned to everyone else's needs is often the person who finds it hardest to say out loud that they also have needs. Not because they don't know, they know. They know perfectly well what they need. They're overly aware after all. But that same system that reads other people's pain calculated somewhere along the way that their own needs are a burden, and that showing them is risky. So, what does a person with this level of awareness actually do? The answer is not to become less aware. You can't switch off a system that has been running since childhood. It would be like asking someone with perfect pitch to stop hearing when a note is slightly off. You don't need to manage yourself somehow. It's about what awareness is for. Right now, for most overly aware people, it serves one primary purpose: protection. Predict what's coming. See the danger before it arrives. Never be caught off guard. But that same awareness, the same depth, the same sensitivity, the same ability to read rooms, people, and silences can be redirected, not towards prediction, but towards genuinely seeing what's there. There is a difference between a laser that exposes every crack in the wall and a candle that lights up the room softly enough to actually be in it. The system doesn't have to become less sharp, it just needs to be pointed in a different direction. And here's what matters. This shift doesn't happen by deciding to become less sensitive. It happens when an overly aware person finally extends to themselves the same quality of understanding they've been extending to everyone else their whole life. Which means the real question is not how to manage awareness. The real question is, who are you reading the room for? Because for a long time, the answer has been for everyone except yourself. Maybe it's time to change that. Write in the comments. I want to know, which part of this felt most like you?